Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, flying solo. So I'm a little late on this one, had some technical difficulties, but I wanted to quickly talk about the Warriors 115-101 loss to the Orlando Magic at Chase Center. The Magic, they have swept the season series, the 2-game season series from the Warriors, just like the Detroit Pistons have. And if you told me at the beginning of the season that was going to be the case, I would have been like, are you kidding me? Like, what's going on? Has any team ever been swept by those two teams and won the title in the history of those teams? I don't know. It was a random thought. I know that those teams have been very good in their histories, but in this one, the Warriors, I mean, that game was just kind of like meh. For lack of a better term. I texted my buddy Aaron in Toronto. I was like, man, this is kind of a boring game. And it sucks because we were all hyped up because Andre Wiggs was coming back and Andre and Iguodala was coming back. And they were obviously rusty. I mean, we expected rust, but Klay Thompson, who'd been playing so dang well recently, he was last second scratch because of precautionary knee soreness and whatnot. And that's fine. He's been playing so many minutes and he's been playing so well that, if there's any kind of, safety, abundance of caution type thing, it's with Klay, and whether it's his ACL or his Achilles or both, just making sure that he's good to go. And in this one, they came out flat, a little lifeless, and that may have had something to do with Klay all of a sudden being out, but they just could never really get a head of steam. And when you get Wiggins back and Iguodala back, you think there's going to be some reinforcements, but I mean, Andre hasn't played all season and Wiggins has been out for, I don't know, like a month or something. And, they started off okay when they were playing, but let's face it, like the Magic, just like the Pistons, they came out really, really wanting to win this game. And also, like the Pistons, the Magic have some young, talented dudes out there who are hungry to come after the defending champs, regardless of who's on the court. So the Warriors never really truly got a foothold, never truly got into a real rhythm. And with Klay Thompson out, my first question was like, okay, as I've been saying this whole stretch, with Steph out, it's like you're going to live and die with Klay and Poole. And they basically have, in terms of, being in games, winning games, losing games, with just Poole, who is going to step up and really, fill up the box score a little bit more. Wiggins, up until the point that he got injured this season, was clearly the Warriors' second most consistent player behind Steph. So it was like, okay, well, yeah, you swap out Klay, but then you swap in Wiggins. But of course, like I said, he's rusty and he's not necessarily that kind of guy that Klay is, who's going to jack up a bunch of shots and, try to get like 30 points, because we've known that Wiggins is very willing to kind of take that step back. And, he's great. He's great for the Warriors and everything, but it wasn't going to just be him. It couldn't be just him. So you're looking around at this team and, hey, Jordan Poole, he never really seemed to get going at all. His line was pretty rough. 5 for 17 in 38 minutes, 2 for 11 from 3, 21 points, 9 for 10 from the line, which, he got to the line, which is great, but still 4 boards, 6 assists, and 4 turnovers. He's still loosey-goosey with the ball. Wiggins, for his part, only 19 minutes, which, again, getting your legs, getting your conditioning, getting your lungs, that's understandable. Only 4 for 12, 2 for 7 from 3. 2 for 2 from the line, 3 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, 3 turnovers, minus 22 on the night, 12 points. Yeah, that's not going to cut it, but it is what it is, right? The the guy that kept them in the game was Anthony Lamb, who hit a bunch of threes early on, and then all of a sudden just jacked up a bunch of shots. I think he hit his first 3 or 4, and then he ended up with 14 attempts from 3, 5 for 14, 9 for 20 overall, 33 minutes, 26 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals. Now, props to him for being aggressive, for seeing that green light and going for it. But you just knew that he was the one that was keeping them close. Just like the Warriors were lucky enough to have him hit shots early on. And with the margin for error being so thin, it was like, okay, the law of averages is going to come into play, and he's going to miss a bunch of these, and he's not going to be able to sustain this for a full 4 quarters or whatever. And he didn't. And the Warriors, they couldn't find anyone else to really get them back in. They tried Patrick Baldwin Jr., and he was okay, 3 for 6 from 3, 3 of 9 overall in 15 minutes, 9 points. But they were hoping maybe, at least I was hoping that he would catch fire and hit 5 threes or 6 threes or something, and just buy some of those really tough to get points that the Warriors could not get. Dante DiVincenzo, 15 points, 5 for 12 overall, 8 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals. But again, that's just not going to be enough. And the Warriors defense, it was rough in patches. In this one, sometimes you just talk about which team has the best player on the floor. And here it was the Magic, Paolo Banchero. He was the best player on the floor in this game overall. Everybody healthy, everybody in rhythm. I don't know if that's the case, but in this, both he and Franz Wagner were kind of dictating tone and pace. Banchero had 25 points on 9 for 20 from the field, 4 for 9 from 3, 5 boards, 3 assists. Franz Wagner, 24 points, 9 for 16, 3 for 7 from 3, 3 for 5 from the line, 2 boards, 2 assists. So, those guys really, impressed me. And I'll be honest, in the 21 draft, I didn't want Franz Wagner in the 7th spot. I was very much hoping for Jonathan Kuminga. But after this one, you got to take a step back. A lot was made of the fact that the Warriors had a couple days off, and you thought that they would be healthy and fresh, and they just looked stale, the complete opposite of fresh. So, you just kind of toss this one because Klay was out. Other dudes were just getting into the flow. They didn't have as much chemistry. I mean, none of the new guys had ever played with Andre Iguodala in NBA minutes. And Wiggins was also trying to find his spot. So, you take a step back, you're like, oh, that was a kind of a whack game to watch, but it is what it is. And you just move on. The Warriors had slid up to the 6th spot on their 2 day during their 2 days off. And that was kind of funny because they hadn't played a game, but they moved up. And it was nice for a moment. And I was like, okay, build on that, really take control of your destiny there and keep rising up the rankings. But, now they're in the 8th spot, which if you've looked at the standings in the West, they're so bunched up with mediocre records right around there that I'm not too concerned. But this is really a time where you want to start squirreling away, packing away wins and making that move up the charts. They play the final game of this homestand on Tuesday against the Phoenix Suns. And I'll be honest, they better get that one, right? They better get that one. I don't know if Klay is going to play in that one. I mean, it'll be roughly almost a week from his previous game, which would have been the Pistons game. And you'll know that he would want that one, even if Devin Booker isn't playing. He's had 2 of his worst games this season, most publicly worst games of the season against the Suns. And he would want that back. But the Suns are reeling, right? They have dropped far in the standings, and there's a big question mark on whether or not they'll be able to dig themselves out of it with Booker being out for so long. So as the Warriors, you better pounce on that. That's a team that is not young the way the Magic or the Pistons are. The Suns, they have some history with the Warriors. So this is a team that won't catch the Warriors off guard in that respect, that they're familiar with, that plays a pace that fits the Warriors roster a little bit more, especially with dudes out. So they better get this one against the Suns. That's all I'm saying. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world, but in terms of losing these past two and then the pacing and then the tempo of things going on the road, getting Steph back, hopefully in San Antonio by Friday, then this is what you want to kind of like end this homestand that was so positive, end it on a positive note, plain and simple, right? Like, hopefully Wiggins shows he's getting his rhythm back a little bit more. Andre Iguodala shows he can make a greater impact and whatnot. And hopefully Poole can snap out of it. And, a lot was made over the last couple of days. When there's no games, there's a lot of just like chatter about stuff that lingers from the previous game. And there was chatter about how Jordan Poole, there shouldn't be any Jordan Poole smack talk or slander or criticism or anything, that Steph had tons of turnovers his early years and whatnot. I mean, there was even behind the back passes in the finals loss to the Cavs, which made no sense. And that's fine. That's fine, right? Like, we all know that about Steph, and still he'll throw some haphazard passes, but like, it doesn't mean that Poole is absolved of any criticism, right? He had major gaffes in a couple of straight games, and we understand who Poole is. We understand like what he can bring, but it doesn't mean that you just let it slide, especially in critical situations. And I've said he'll get better, obviously, like that's not a question. But, hopefully he doesn't have these kinds of brain farts, gaffes, or whatever in critical moments in important seeding game or in the playoffs, whatever. So he's a proven playoff player to some extent, so you worry less. But he's also hasn't had as many of these like tight games where it comes down to the final few possessions without Steph, right? So he's trying to do a lot, trying to do maybe too much, and trying to prove he's worth $140 million starting next season, right? So, like all this emotional talk about like, oh, he's young, no, don't pile on him. Maybe there's people, on social media who are just being irrationally cruel, because that's what social media does, unfortunately. But to me, it's like, yeah, you look at Poole and you see his good qualities, you see his bad qualities, and you just want him to improve. And that's the whole point of criticism, right? Of calling stuff out. It's like, because he's done this. It's not just these handful of games on this home stretch this past week, but it's throughout. I've been pointing this out for the majority of Poole's career since he's become a legit six-man player. So, he'll do things where he'll lose the ball slips out of his hand, that where he'll drive to the bucket and then get stonewalled and have no idea what to do with the ball. And he'll, like I said, either dive for a foul, get blocked, or jump in the air and try to pass it to the 3-point line. And a lot of times that gets picked off. So these are things as a young developing player that he needs to continually develop. He's not a finished product. I don't think anyone claims that, right? But it's the decisions. It's the decisions, It's like Klay's hot. Klay brought you guys back to these points. He's earned that shot, especially if he's pretty open. So it's just those kinds of things. And in the moment, there's a lot of frustration, but also like, I don't think anyone's saying like, oh, okay, now Poole's the problem, trade him. Before it was like, oh, get rid of so-and-so. And now it's like, Poole. So that's just the rhythm of the season. And, for this Orlando game, it's disappointing with the effort overall and the vibe. If I went to that game personally, I'd be like, dang, I'd want my money back. But it's like, you take a step back, the Warriors are missing a ton of dudes. And as long as those dudes get healthy collectively soon, then, feeling pretty decently. You're starting to look at the standings more seriously. And the Suns game is the 41st game of the season. So halfway right then and there, right? 82 game season. So 41st game. So that's another reason why you want to finish this first half of the season, this homestand, on a definitive high note. You know what I'm saying? Because if you get Steph back and hopefully Klay back soon and Kuminga back soon and Wiggins gets in a rhythm, Andre Iguodala can play 10 to 15 minutes without getting hurt. Wiseman hopefully can get back in the mix. And then, of course, JaMychal Green. Then that's like that's just like seven guys who are either out or just got back. So let's not worry too much about like the Warriors roster, in my opinion. I mean, again, I'm a Wiseman believer, and I've said it's a shame that he's been out this stretch because it was his opportunity to really, really solidify his spot on the roster. And in my opinion, I was hoping that this was his opportunity where he could jump JaMychal Green, that he could play convincingly well enough to keep that spot and really, really just distance himself from JaMychal Green in terms of like he's the backup center, period. So we'll see how that plays out. But, I don't worry about this roster right now healthy. But you do start thinking like, okay, let's get some of these wins going because, it's like it's an opportunity right now. It's their chance to really pack those away and separate themselves from the other record-wise mediocre teams. You know what I mean? Because after this Phoenix game, there's still some winnable games. They go Friday at San Antonio, then Sunday against the Bulls in Chicago, Monday in DC against the Wizards. But then they run into the Celtics in Boston and then the Cavs in Cleveland on Friday, January 20th. So there's some winnable games in that stretch, right? Like healthy, the Warriors can win any game, of course, but there's a few front-loaded teams there where it's like, okay, if this is when Steph gets back, he can hopefully get up to speed and play some lesser teams before running into the Celtics, who are going to be really, really trying to prove a point, and the Cavs. So, we'll see. We'll see. It's unfortunate, though, that Moses Moody hasn't been able to really, really make a mark at all in any of these games. He's done some positive things, right? But there's not much noise there. It's like he doesn't really make much of an impression. And I still think he can be a good NBA player, but I just don't know what it is, right? There's a question of whether or not Patrick Baldwin Jr. has potentially moved past Moody in the rotation. And of course, they play different positions, but just in the future, when more guys are healthy, will Patrick Baldwin Jr. be that guy who they need to come in the game and hit big threes, right? Because it's not so much a question of them playing the same position, but we know that there's a bunch of guards on this team. You go Steph, Klay, Poole, DiVincenzo, Ty Jerome, right? 5 guards. And then Moody hasn't been able to get in front of any of those dudes. So if it's a question of him not getting minutes ahead of any of those guys, then, when it comes down to it, you're going to having like a stretch 4, stretch 5, stretch big, like PBJ down the road, who can, get out there, be a big body, and then also play smart and hit threes. Then his value to this team kind of changes the calculus a little bit in terms of who the Warriors see in the future, who they should keep, who they would want to keep. Again, they play different positions, but the Warriors can certainly see a situation where it's like, okay, we're set at the guard spot in the future. And then also Ryan Rollins, who I'm pretty high on, but he needs a ton of development. He will be fighting for guard minutes next season. And then like saying, okay, let's put our money, our resources where it best fits. And that's like those guys, and moving on perhaps from Moses Moody, maybe, is he in the trade value mix type thing? So And just something put out there. I'm pulling for the kid, but it's unfortunate that he hasn't been able to do more during this stretch when Steph has been out, when Wiggins has been out, and then Klay and this one was out. So, and then Kuminga's been out. Again, like Moody plays guard and small forward, but, there's some overlap with some of those other dudes. And he had, in theory, an opportunity, but just hasn't been able to overcome Ty Jerome, Anthony Lamb, or anyone else. So, but we'll see. It's a long season, and it's just early January, and we're looking for this team to get healthy and to start, finding its rhythm soon. So that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm expecting. And we'll go from there. And if things go into the tank again on the road, we'll see. But, there's still the trade deadline in a month. So we'll go from there. All right.